I'd like to invite Peter Jackson, Chair of the Disabilities Trust, up to talk to us next. And Peter has been involved in both the business and the voluntary sector. He's been the chairman of Kingfisher, which incorporates B&Q and Screwfix, and he's also been the chief executive of Association of British Foods, which has also included Primark and British Sugar. So would you welcome Peter Jackson? Thank you.
That's interesting what Alison had to say there. I think people's appreciation that businesses are part of the community and a core part of the community is something, if anything, it's increasing. During the 90s, there was a thing all about it's all about shareholder value. But people are increasingly looking for more, be it an employee or anybody in the organisation. As an aside, I'm doing this because I haven't got any slides, so I'm just generally chatting. But I was talking to somebody yesterday, which was terribly convenient for this debate, and he was a guy who left school at 16. He set up a business that has been quite successful making electrical saws in the north of England. And he came to see me about a year ago saying, look, he was comfortable now. He's made more money than he expected to make. He made more money than his wife expected to make, and his kids, he didn't want to spoil his kids. And he came to see me in Stamford, and he said, I can't really see why I'm driving this. I like to win, but I can't really see what I'm driving it. And after some thinking, he decided to turn it round so that sort of working with the community became one of the corporate goals that he actually taught everybody he recruited. And he changed it round, and he was talking to me yesterday about how much a difference this has made. It gave him a focus that more than just winning, because, I mean, numbers often, once you've actually got your head above water, numbers are basically a way of keeping score. But he was keeping a score that meant that he was actually helping the community. And he's also made such a massive difference to his 85 staff that he had. So it wasn't a massive company, but he got 85 staff who all now are volunteering and all really buying into the objectives of the organisation. So everything that Alison was saying is true. Now, I've used sort of one and a half minutes of my time already. When I was talking to Rosie, I said, what is it you really want me to talk about? She said, I'd like you to review the national situation on charities, review that, and then I'd like you to come back and talk about Evergreen, all right? Which is a little bit tight. So let me just make some generalizations. First of all, the generalizations, you can't make generalizations. There are 200,000 charities in the UK. And some of them are great, most of them are great, and there are some fantastic people working in them. One thing you can say is that the current environment for most of them is challenging. Government grants to the third sector have been reduced by half in the last 10 years. Government grants, grants from local government are down 50% what they were 5 years ago. So things are tight. And there's also a donor fatigue for some people. And also quite interesting, I was looking at some numbers through an organisation called New Capital Philanthropy, and they were saying that their surveys are showing that trust in the charity sector has reduced quite significantly, people's trust in it, and it's been reduced quite significantly because things like the kids company, the trustees issue in the kids company, the pressurised funding, the lady who sold poppies, and high salaries that a lot of organisations pay. So people are prepared to give less. So if I had some screen here that I was actually thought in advance to use, I'd have a slide that came needs of the population here, going from a traditional slide, this basically, every presentation's got one. Bottom left-hand corner, this is what's happening to the needs of society as the NHS are trying to put people back into the community faster. Funds are drying up, and the ability of the charitable sector to actually meet this, and it's going down. So you've got a problem there. So generally, in a lot of the charities in the UK, you've got a lot of stress. At the minute, they're really trying. A lot of them are really trying their best. And a thing that I've noticed is happening. A lot of them that have been traditionally dependent on grants or doing work for local councils, etc., are having to take their offering down. Whereas sort of 25 years ago, if they were a charity, there was a bounce to it, an extra bit in being a charity. Now, just to survive, they're having to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And there are private companies prepared to sort of bottom feed going in behind them. So throughout the sector now, you've got people who are just trying to hang on and making probably less of a charitable contribution than they would have done in the old days. I've got 2 pages here, and I'm on to my second page now, so that's okay. Some of these charities are big charities. As Alison was talking about, you've got national charities, and it's interesting that sort of 1% of the charities in the UK have 50% of the assets that are given to the whole charitable sector. So, I mean, you've got some really big organisations there that are corporate, and you don't really know. I mean, I think some of them are fantastic. I think Médecins Sans Frontières is one of the best charities in the world, but you can't actually be specific. If you give it money, you don't exactly know where it's going, apart from the fact you trust them. We've got some that are vibrant, and Evergreen is one of the ones that are vibrant. I found out about Evergreen because my wife was, oh, by the way, I was talking to a couple of people today who don't know what Evergreen does. I think by the time you leave the room after this, you ought to really that ought to be your objective, to really find out what they do. They're not just good, good. I'm not one of those, good. They're not good in inverted commas. They're fantastic, and they do a lot of work. But, yeah, sorry, where was it? Yeah, so you've got, I started doing it, that's right. I started doing it because my wife was delivering some soups for them at lunchtime, and she asked me to stand in for a driver a couple of times. So I was going around Stamford on this route, seeing old ladies, tends to be old ladies, which is a bit worrying when you're my age. Tends to be old ladies in the older age group, which is getting narrow when you get to my age. And we realised that actually, if it wasn't for Evergreen seeing them, or us seeing them that day, they weren't going to see anybody. There was almost, if it's the right word to use, there was almost an epidemic of people who've either come to Stamford because they've been here all the time, or they've come to Stamford because the daughter's here, or whatever, and the daughter's working, and they're just living behind closed doors. So there are hundreds of them around the piece. And I realised that sort of Evergreen was special in that, A, it had got the founder's zeal. And I shall try to talk about Louise without bursting into tears. See, I've succeeded. But she's a fantastic founder. She told me early on she's been doing this for since 2005. Yeah? And it's got 600, there are 600 people using Evergreen. And the key thing that I think is remarkable in a town like this and the villages surrounding is the 200 volunteers. Now you struggle anywhere to find an organisation that's sort of engaged with its society as much as that, to have an army of 200 volunteers. That's really saying a lot. And stacks of people in Stamford don't even know about it, but they all know. Everybody in this room's either got a mum, a dad, a neighbour, or whatever it is that could benefit from Evergreen and probably will benefit from Evergreen at some time. And Evergreen just does it with these 200 wonderful volunteers. It can do more if it gets more support, and I'd love to support it as much as I can. But the whole purpose of tonight is to get people to actually understand about Evergreen. I mean, there are slightly sexier charities, and there are some fantastic ones, often based on an individual, where you can actually make it sort of really go for the heart, and those are really valid. But looking after old people, and mind you, in an increasingly aging population, looking after old people isn't always sexy, but this group of people are making a massive difference. So if I can say anything, having gone over my 5 minutes, is Evergreen's special. I know Evergreen's also special because I've been, for the last 3-4 years, been judging the Peterborough Area Charity of the Year. So I've seen some really good people in some charities all the way around the area. But I've not seen any organisation, with the possible exception of one, just brief this, possible who actually measure up anywhere near Evergreen. I think they're fantastic. So that's me done. Thank you.